We've got a code red. I repeat, a code red. People are thinking for themselves. Woo! Anyway, genres. Genres, for anyone who's unaware, are categories that different forms of media divide themselves into, such as romance, comedy, horror, sci-fi, and more. These genres also fit into two sections, fiction and non-fiction. Fiction being made-up stuff, and non-fiction being actually happened stuff. Within these different genres are also subgenres. So for instance, the fantasy genre can branch off to dark fantasy, high fantasy, superhero fantasy, and more. I'm a dark fantasy author. Basically, dark fantasy incorporates disturbing and frightening themes of fantasy. It often combines fantasy with elements of horror or has a gloomy dark tone or a sense of horror and dread. So in a sense, it's just horror with magic and with dragons and magic. Thank you, Google. If you're trying to find what genre you work best with, then write. For instance, whenever I try to write a romance, I find I tend to lean more towards like heartache and arguments and also potentially death, casual stuff. I can't write anything non-fiction per se, since I hate having to write out the moments properly and not just a whole load of nonsense. Even when I was 6, I had a little notebook that appeared like out of nowhere. No clue where it came from. Could have been my mom's, but I'm not sure. It also looked like something that could be made at home since the outside was construction paper and the inside was like blank or lined paper. I don't remember which. Anyway, it was stapled together like a notebook and appeared out of nowhere. I'd even tried to give it to my mom before, but she claimed she never knew where it came from and asked me why I was giving it to her. Though like 2 weeks after I finally decided to use it, she came to me asking where I had taken her notebook and described what I tried giving her in perfect detail. So I showed it to her again, and she yelled at me about wasting paper and yada yada. Anyway, I decided to write a non-fiction about stars, because I couldn't sleep one night and had nothing better to do than write, draw, and look at the night sky through my window. Since I didn't have any books at the time and didn't want to risk waking my parents up due to the loud noises and bright light if I were to, say, watch TV or play video games, in the end, it was horrible. I got bored and being factual pretty quick. I got bored of being factual pretty quickly, and being 6 years old, I didn't really know anything about stars. I ended up coming upon it a few years later and began to cry due to how adorable it was. Nothing was spelt correctly, of course, and there were random stops throughout the story, but it was still adorable that I had chosen story writing at such an early age. Granted, non-fiction was definitely not for me. So at one point while writing it, I decided to humanize the stars and give them backstories. One twinkled brightly and had a loving family to go home to, but ended up dying somehow. I ended up crying because I gravitated towards death, but I've had depression all my life, so it makes sense now. But all in all, 6-year-old me enjoyed writing that story at 6 a.m. That's supposed to say like 2 or 3 a.m., but whatever. In fact, now I'd like to have it displayed like a trophy. My very beginnings. But sadly, my mom used it as a fire starter and yelled at me for being selfish when I got upset about it. So, oh well. But on a side note, I'm personally going to do this, and I'm going to recommend it to others as well. Don't say something is a waste when your kid chooses to use it. I got scared to use up paper for a while after my mom yelled at me when I was 6 for it. It's a factor in your child's development, and when I have kids, they're going to have access to all forms of creativity they set their minds to. Unlimited notebooks, books to read, drawing pads, music, and no paper is a waste when it comes to them. So basically, what I'm trying to say by also including that little story, pay attention to what you gravitate to. You gravitate towards romance, write romance, and you work on improving your abilities in that genre. You want to write novels, but you find you gravitate towards poetry, write poetry. You can create a bunch of poems and turn them into a collection, which can be formatted into a book. You shouldn't force yourself to create in a genre or format you don't like, because no matter what, you'll still end up subconsciously writing in a different genre. However, that doesn't mean that it's pointless to try and write in other genres. You can still write in many different genres with practice, but don't forget, if you tend to gravitate towards a certain genre, then chances are that you enjoy that genre most. To also find what genre works best for you in terms of writing, it would also be good to read books within the said genre of tons of different tropes and plots. It'll help you see what is expected within what you wish to write. But don't forget, there are hundreds of genres and subgenres out there. Seriously, just look at Spotify's yearly wrap. Yeah, I hate that I did that too. But anyway, the point still stands. You may think that you write in one subgenre, so you put research into it, but it turns out that you may write in a completely different subgenre. For instance, when I first started writing, I knew that I typically gravitated towards fantasy. But when I was setting up my novel to be published, I originally thought I wrote it in a more epic or high fantasy. Then, after I had my novels published, finished my novels and had them ready to be published, I realized I actually gravitated more towards dark fantasy. But instead decided to write it off because I thought dark fantasy at first was just the surroundings being dark all the time. And well, ever since I've known what genre and subgenre I tend to gravitate towards, I've been working on improving my skill within writing those topics. Though I have also been trying to improve my romance writing skills as well. But I'm still nowhere near as good as the published authors when it comes to romance genre. Perhaps dark romance, but even then I tend to go to the dark portion a bit too quickly. And well, that's all I can think about. Read, write, do some research, and pay attention to what you drift to. Don't forget, it'll take years of practice before you're any good, so best to start now and be better later than regret never starting in the first place. But go at your own pace. I don't want to end up burnt out and still forced to go on like me. Alright, time to get to concluding this thing. Check out my novels Death Trill, Flame Rip, and Arctic Blaze on Amazon and Kobo, link in description. Check out the Crave Writing Club Patreon in the description. Check out the Crave Writing Club Discord server in the description. Check out my personal Instagram at dark_night_wolves. And let's bring this week's meeting to an end. Go, go, go! Before they get to the independent children!